Astro's Playroom was a brilliant PS5 tech demo that showed off the capabilities of the DualSense controller in ways that were fun and impressive back then, but now I don't really care anymore. I would rather a controller have more battery life, last longer than a year without stick drift, and have its price cut in half if I could trade away all these extra features like haptic feedback, adaptive triggers, motion controls, and microphones. To that end, Astro Bot, a full-fledged adventure spanning a dozen or so hours of completionism, proves that it's not carried by bells and whistles, because even though I no longer care about the simulated feeling of raindrops hitting my controller, this game kicks ass anyway. I 100%ed Astrobot, collected every puzzle piece, rescued every bot, and finished every hidden level. The gimmicks are secondary. The nostalgia is secondary. The primary factor of Astrobot's resounding success is that it's a clear passion project. You can feel the love in everything. The gorgeous visuals, the methodical level design, the extra worlds, the sheer number of polygons they flood the screen with at certain times. Even the ending credits make it clear that everyone on this team is proud of what they did. It's the same feeling I got playing Super Mario Wonder. The attention to detail and the goal of surprising the player as frequently as possible to keep them engaged is a winning design philosophy that rears its head here as well. There's not a single second of this game where I'm like, oh, they phoned that in. Now, does the nostalgia help? Oh, certainly. If you ever had a Sony console at any point in your life, this game will speak differently to you than to the uninitiated, and the further back your ties to PlayStation are, the firmer a grip it'll have on you. I've been playing Crash Bandicoot since I was 5, so you can imagine I'm a right sucker for all this. Still, I only recognize probably 70% of the PlayStation characters that Team Asabi have turned into rescuable bots. They've reached deep into the catalog and pulled out some adjutants. For every Crash or Spyro, there's a Cool Borders guy or a dude with a sword who could be anyone. And there's still plenty of notable ones they didn't put in, though they have announced that free DLC is coming later this year with more bots to find. My hope is to see Tag from Mod Nation Racers and more characters from Crash, Sly, Spyro, and the Jak and Daxter games. There are 301 total bots, a few more if you got the deluxe edition I think, so maybe some of the ones I just wished for were in there, but only a bit more than half the total bots are actual PlayStation characters, with the rest being blank slates. 169 PlayStation characters is still plenty though, even if a few are clones or just different variations of the same thing. Generally, I think a decent amount of the pull of continuing to play this game is to see what character might show up next, so I'll refrain from spoiling too many of them, as well as which PlayStation properties have their own dedicated homage level where you're basically playing an Astrobotted version of that game and it's awesome. You'll expect some of them for sure, but definitely not all of them. Before we get into the game graph, I just want to address some discourse surrounding the game coming from certain demographics. Some people are deep in the trenches of the console war and view every game as a gun meant to be pointed at their enemies, or one pointed at themselves by their enemies. It's cranium-corroding garbage all around. The Sony fanboys are like, this is the greatest platformer to have ever existed, take that, Mario. And the Nintendo fanboys are like, maybe Astrobot should take its head out of Super Mario Galaxy's ass. As someone who loves platformers from both Sony and Nintendo, I will make this series of statements. Yes, you can see some of the Mario inspiration in Astrobot, but they don't play similarly at all. That inspiration is enhanced by superior hardware and creates the type of technical prowess that Nintendo fans should be praying for Mario to one day have access to if Nintendo ever decides to create a console they can keep up. If you think Mario is far and away a superior platforming juggernaut, you should literally froth at the mouth at the idea of all that being upgraded to the specs that Astrobot is working with. That said, I still like Super Mario Odyssey better than this game, but they're also operating at different scales, like Odyssey is much bigger. And normally I would not just randomly come up with these thoughts in a vacuum to taunt people or instigate shit. The other weird discourse I've been seeing is the idea that Astrobot isn't a real game, that it's for kids, and I can't believe there are still people with such repressed joy out there. Like, who beat it out of you? Who's gonna walk up and deck you in the fucking face for liking a vibrant and fun platformer that spans multiple decades of gaming history? At what age are you like, goodbye to everything that used to make me smile, I can only play Call of Duty and FIFA now or my friends will spit on me? It's insane that there are people like this. So let's get to the game graph, where we judge story, graphics, mechanics, and fun as separate categories before culminating in an overall score at the end, starting with story. Astro Bot's story is very typical bare-bones platformer stuff. You're chasing a guy who stole something from you, and every world you complete puts you a little closer to getting it back as the guy you're chasing runs a little further until you both reach the end of the game and have a final showdown. This is the type of thing I would give an NA rating to. Nobody is here for a story. You're here to jump on things. You might still feel something at the end, though. My eyes were shimmering most of the way through the final battle, just seeing how all the bots I'd rescued, especially the recognizable ones, were now helping me in my fight against the alien. Like, they're all here because of me, and now they're returning the favor. It's nice. Story still gets an NA, though. Next up is graphics, and the graphics are absurd. Astro Bot has been added to the very short list of most gorgeous games ever created. It also runs like an absolute dream, handling pixels better than anything I've ever seen, and it knows it can do it too. You'll kill a boss up a tree, and like 10,000 individual apples will fall from the sky, and you can bump into all of them and knock them all away with punches and spin attacks without the slightest hint of slowdown. Astro Bot is a technological marvel, and I literally can't imagine what better would look like. Graphics get an incredibly rare perfect 100 out of 100 score. I think I've only given one of those to a category before. Now we have mechanics, and this is where I can put a little dampener on the glaze parade. This game does not have HP, except in a couple of major boss fights, which means every enemy in the game can kill you in one hit, and some of them sure will. This was the case in Astro's Playroom too, and I didn't like it back then either. The checkpoints are plentiful in everything but the Shapesticle courses, which are bonus levels you have to beat in one go, but there's just a weird disconnect for me that a game that otherwise isn't challenging for the most part would have such a cutthroat health system. Like, even old platformers that were known for being hard were more lenient. Donkey Kong Country had partner swapping if you got hit, Croc had gems you dropped instead of dying, Crash had the Aku mask, Astro Bot has no protection, except for the bosses where he does. So it's like, why not have those extra hearts in the regular levels too, and just take them out for the shape challenges, since those are the only levels that are supposed to be difficult. I find it more annoying to die in this game because it feels less natural. One thing I do appreciate, though, is that contact damage is only a thing if the enemy is spiked or electrified, and that's how it should be, because this game in particular would be miserable if it wasn't. The general combat is punching dudes, or jumping over them and lasering them with your feet, or using whatever power-up is at your disposal. Some power-ups are better than others. I personally hate the inflating one because it's so slow, but others like the Min-Min Fists and Rocket Dash are decent, with my favorite being a mouse power-up that lets you shrink down and access small places, and a sponge power-up that makes you hella big when you absorb water. Each level has one power-up that they design the level around, so you get to really play around with the utility. And after every main area boss, there's a bonus level where you transform into a famous PlayStation character and use an ability from their game to play a reference level designed around it. I'll just talk about the one that I see other reviews default to using as an example, because I think they showed it in trailers or something, which is the God of War inspired level after the second boss. They give you the Leviathan axe, and you get to throw it at enemies and objects to freeze them, just like in the recent God of War games. It's such a trip. There's Odin's ravens to find, plenty of God of War characters to rescue, puzzle mechanisms to figure out, the whole 9 yards. I agree with the sentiment that there should be more of these. I think there's only 5. I'm even greedy enough to imagine a sequel where most of the levels are like that. I'm trying to see a stealthy Sly Cooper-inspired level where you use his cane and his Master Thief moves to traverse stuff, or a spooky Silent Hill level, or a race level from one of the racing franchises. The well is far from dry. All told, I give mechanics an 85. And lastly, fun. Is Astro Bot fun? Yeah. The end. Fun gets a 90. And now for the overall score, which is not an aggregate of previous scores because some things are weighted differently. I'm giving Astro Bot a 90 out of 100. It's a high-tier platformer with top-tier engineering and nostalgia. That's gonna do it for this review. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can like, share, and subscribe. Watch all my other videos from years ago that are carried by nostalgia, and I'll see you guys next time.